Welcome back to the IE427 garage, everybody. Today we are corner weighting our Factory 5 Mark 4 prototype. I've got it up on the lift and I'm working right now on checking all of the tire pressures. So it's really going to depend on the tire manufacturer, the tread wear rating, and the overall weight of the car. Most of these cars are going to weigh between 2,100 and 2,300 pounds, depending on how highly optioned they are, how much thermal and sound insulation you install in the car, what type of seats are installed. All that stuff that adds to the weight is going to determine what you're going to set your tire pressures at. I set the tire pressures on Ed and Kathy's Mark 4, which used the same tires, the Mickey Thompsons. I set them at 21 pounds for the front, and I set them at 20 pounds in the back. I haven't received any negative feedback from Ed and Kathy so far, so I'm assuming that those tire pressures are working out perfectly for them. Now, the way to check your tire wear and your tire pressures is to watch the tread wear on the tires. So what you're going to do is, after you put a few miles on them, you're going to either see them wearing in the center, which means they're overinflated, or you're going to see them wearing on the edges, the outside edge and the inside edge. That means they're underinflated. With a car that only weighs 2,000 pounds, it's really tough. So what you're going to do is you're going to invest in one of these inexpensive thermometers that you can get at Harbor Freight. You can get these at your local home center. And what you're going to do is, after you've driven the car and you've put some heat into the tires, is you're going to check the tire wear or the tire temperature all the way across the tire. So you're going to check it from the inside edge to the center to the outside edge. And what you want is you want the most even temperature across the entire tire. If you're seeing that the center of the tire is hotter than the outsides, either the inside or the outside, then you're going to have to adjust your tire pressures accordingly. That's a much easier way to do it than waiting until your tires wear a particular pattern in the tires. Because like I said, these cars just don't weigh all that much, and so they typically don't wear the tires like a 4,000 to 5,000 pound passenger car is going to. So that's what you're going to do to check your tire pressures. So let me get this thing ready to put up on the scales. I've got to disconnect the sway bars, and I'll bring you right back and I'll walk you through the procedure of corner weighting the car. All right, so I've got the car farther up on the lift, and what I've worked on is getting the ride height set. Now, the front ride height was just spot on. Now, you guys, I believe, have seen me do this before. I take basically a straight edge, and that straight edge allows me something to measure off of. So it's just a straight bar from one runway over to the other. And what I do is I measure from the bottom of the straight edge to the bottom of the frame rail. And I've got 4 inches in the front, which is right where I want it. So then what I do is I take it to the back. Now, I did have to lower the back. I set the ride height a little high initially because I want to see if the springs are going to settle. Now, these are really good quality springs. We invested in some iBox springs. And so they don't settle nearly as much as the Factory 5 springs do. So back here, what I did is, let me get this light up here. All right, back here what I did is the same thing. I took and measured from the bottom of the rail to the bottom of the frame here, and I've got 4 3/4 inches on this side, and I've got 4 5/8 on this side. Now, don't get all worried about the difference from side to side. The steel tubes, when they're welded, even though they're welded in a jig, there's gonna be a little bit of twist that goes along with the frame, and this frame is extremely rigid. So don't try to fight your corner weights by getting the frame measurements from the bottom of the frame to the ground, or in this case, the bottom of my bar. Perfect. You're more concerned about transferring weight or pressure on all four corners. That's more important. An eighth of an inch from side to side, you're not going to see. And I think that's where a lot of guys get caught up when they're trying to do their initial ride height. They get caught up on, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. No, it's got to be close to that. And as long as it looks the same on both sides, and you can't view both sides of the car at the same time, you're fine. So get your ride height set. Like I said, I set the ride height 1/4 of an inch higher in the back, just because they're a lighter weight spring. They're 350s in the back. Is that what we ran? I think we ran 250s. Yeah, I think we ordered 250s for the back. So it's a softer spring anyway. So that little bit of extra room is gonna just allow that extra bit of travel and a softer ride when the springs do kind of break in or settle. Like I said, the Eibach springs generally don't do that, but we're just trying to give ourselves just a little bit more cushion so that we don't have any rubbing on the tires, to the fenders, or anything like that. So that's all done. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna raise up the front of the car. I'm gonna stick the scales underneath. I've already disconnected the front sway bar. The back sway bar, I've got to lower the car down to actually disconnect it because it's an aftermarket sway bar. And so the end link is outside right over here. So I'm going to have to disconnect that end link, and the easiest place to disconnect it is right there. And so once I disconnect that, and you only have to disconnect one side. Basically, you just don't want the weight transferring from one side to the other through the sway bar. You want to get equal. You want to get a true reading of your corner weights before you reattach your sway bar. All right, initial setup on this car is giving us an opportunity to show you how far things can be off. Now, I didn't set this car up any differently than I've set up any other car in the past, but over the last couple of cars that I've corner weighted, they've almost been spot on when I first took up the scales. This one isn't. So it's gonna let me show you how to adjust the corner weights. Now, there's a big misconception that we're moving weight in the car, and we're not. The weight in the car doesn't change. All we're doing is we're equalizing the pressure that each corner of the car exerts down on the ground. So the weight in the car stays the same, but the pressures that the actual suspension, the tires, the wheels push down on the ground is what we're changing, because we want equal pressure all the way around, so that not only do you get a better cornering vehicle, but you get a better stopping vehicle. If you've got equal weight on all four corners, equal pressure, you're not going to lock up the brakes. Now, that goes into a whole different subject, because if you go on the forums and if you go on the Facebook pages, guys are saying, oh, you got to lock up the back brakes, or you got to lock up the front brakes. You don't want the brakes to lock up. You want the brakes to stop the car. If you're sliding, you're not stopping. So that's where threshold braking comes into play, but that's a subject for another time. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to exert the same amount of pressure, as close to the same amount of pressure, on all four corners of the car. So right now, as it stands, I have a 52.22% weight on the left front and the right rear. So those two corners are heavy. My light corners are going to be the left rear and the front right. Now, my adjustment for my ride height is perfect in the front. It's 4 inches. It's right where I want it. But if you remember, as I was setting the ride height on the back, I had 4 3/4 on the passenger side, and I had 4 5/8 on this side. So that means that either one of the coil springs is just a tad bit shorter than the other, or when I ran down the collars initially, setting up the coilovers, I may have put an extra turn in one of them versus the other. Most likely the one on the passenger side got an extra turn. So what we're going to do, we're going to raise the car back up. We're going to raise it up just enough so we can turn the collars on the coilovers, and I'm going to put 3 turns, 3 whole revolutions on this left rear. And I'm hoping to combat that weight. Now, whatever I do on this corner is going to affect the front right corner. And you'll see that when I adjust it and we come back to the scales. You're going to see that it helps to even those weights out. Now, the weights on the corners, the number, the numerical portion of the number is not going to change. Meaning, I'm not going to get all 4 corners to be absolutely 530 pounds, okay? Because the weight in the car isn't proportioned that way. What we're trying to do is add the numbers on the corners for the front right and the left rear to be the same as the front left and the right rear, or as close to them as we can. We want to be 49.8 or better as far as our corner weights. If we get that close, we're going to leave it alone. Because once you start trying to micromanage those little numbers, you end up making broad swings in the amount of weight that you're changing, or the pressure that you're changing on the corners. So if you get close, stop. It's good enough. Because we don't have the weight of the driver in there. And we never, for a street car, we never have a driver sitting in there. We don't have a half a tank of fuel in the fuel tank. We're just trying to set this car up so that it's going to have the best balance regardless of how many people are in the car, whether there's one person just driving alone or whether there's a passenger in the car with them. If they've got luggage in the trunk or a full tank of gas. We just want to set a base number that's going to give them the best braking performance and the overall cornering performance that we can get. All right, I went against my own rule and I started making fine adjustments. Initially, I put 3 turns into the left rear tire, and it netted me a 51 something. I didn't have the camera running, so I can't tell you exactly what it was. Oh, I'm leaning on the scale. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'll just take a turnout. And I took a turnout, and I got to like 50 point, I forgot what it was. But I was in the 50s, 50%. And so I looked at it and I go, I'll take another half turnout. And I took another half turnout, and this is where we're at. And this never happens. So right now, we've got a 50% weight bias between the 4 corners of the car. So we've got 517 on the left rear. We've got 517 on the left front. We've got 516 on the right rear. And we've got 518 on the right front. So that's about perfect. So we're not gonna mess with anything else. Now we can take the left rear off and add the left front, and our weight bias front to rear is 50.05. So remember, even though the engine is in front of the driver in this car, it's still considered a mid-engine car because the engine sits so far back from the front axle. So it's a front-engine, mid-engine car. And so that allows you to get this weight bias near perfect. So like I said, that never happens. I never get it perfectly at 50%. It was just dumb luck. Now, it'll probably change a little bit when the body goes on because honestly, the body is, like hand-molded with fiberglass, and so some areas get a little more fiberglass resin than the others, and so it changes the weight around on the car a little bit, but not enough that we're probably going to have to rescale this car. I may put it up on the scales, but I probably won't make any adjustments. So that'll give you a pretty good idea of what's entailed in moving the pressures on the wheels or the tires on the ground takes. The easiest thing is to just concentrate on one corner. So like I said, we had the front end of the car perfect as far as the ride height. It was right at 4 inches from the bottom of the frame rails to the ground, or in this case, my measuring bar. And so I didn't want to adjust those. And generally, I make all my weight corrections on the rear of the car. It's just easier that way. And I always concentrate on raising the car up or increasing the pressure on whatever the corner is that has the lowest downward pressure onto the ground. That was this wheel. Don't start going from this tire to that tire and from that tire to that tire. You're just going to chase your tail. Only make your adjustments on one corner of the car, because again, we're not moving weight in the car, we're changing the pressures at which the coil springs press down on the ground. So I think that's going to wrap things up for this one. I'm going to be aligning the car next time. Now, this is a 3-link car, so other than centering the rear axle, there's not a whole lot to do in the rear other than checking the pinion angle, which we've already done. So we're going to start on our front end alignment in the next video, so stay tuned for that. If you are enjoying the content here, please do the like, the share, the comments, all that kind of stuff. We really appreciate the support the channel has gotten. We're kind of the underdog of the Factory 5 videos, because we're not out driving the cars all the time. We're not just, you know, doing cold starts. We're actually doing work on the cars, and I'm hoping that a lot of you guys are picking up some good tips from these videos. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.